Good evening, everyone. This is Shirley Jenwright. Thank you for joining us on our fourth educational webinar sponsored by the Communities of Trust Committee. And this committee was established in 2014 to help build positive relationships between our communities and our public safety agencies, specifically law enforcement. Tonight, we will be talking about the roles and responsibilities of our school resource officers. We have a great panel, and we're looking forward to having them introduced and start our webinar. Thank you for joining us, because I realize now that school has started, you're probably pretty busy, especially if you have students at home and your mom, dad, and teacher. We had some questions that had been previously submitted via email. Those will be answered first. You have an opportunity as a participant to send questions through the link at the bottom. I think it's a chat or questions. All of our questions will not be answered because we got quite a few. If they are not answered, I would try to work with our panelists afterwards to respond to those questions and have them posted on our website, which is www.communitiesoftrust.com. We will be having a fifth webinar, so I'll tell you about that now, not in details, on the Restorative Justice Program in the Fairfax County Public Schools and the Alternative Accountability Program in the Fairfax County Juvenile Justice System. You can become a member of the Fairfax County Communities of Trust by sending us a message. It is open to anyone who is in agreement and in alignment with our mission, goals, and objectives. And you can find those also on our website, communitiesoftrust.com. So with that being said, I would like to introduce to you our moderator for the evening. She is a 20-year employee of the Fairfax County government, and her title is Community Interfaith Coordinator. And in that role, she works diligently to build those relationships between all of our faith groups and Fairfax County. And many of you have probably seen her in anything that involves faith groups and Fairfax County, because she is all over. She has a passion for helping, especially when it comes for those at risk, those who are homeless, those who are in need. Ramona came in and asked if the Communities of Trust Committee could possibly run a campaign for personal hygiene items for individuals who use the SNAP program because they cannot purchase them. This was about 2 months ago. And for those of you who don't know about it, we have bins in each of our police stations in the lobby where you can purchase and drop off personal hygiene items. So this is one of Ramona's passions. This is what she does, in addition to running all around the county, coordinating what the faith groups need to do. So with no further ado, as they would say, I would like to introduce you and thank you, Ramona, for joining us as our moderator for tonight, Ramona Carroll.
Thank you so much, Shirley, for that very warm introduction. I appreciate it, and thank you for all the work that's being done through Communities of Trust with those in need during this time to be able to purchase personal care items. I am thrilled to be with you all today with this wonderful panel to talk about a topic that is often in the news right now as people think about police officers, they think about school resource officers, And we want to really get an understanding of what is the school resource officer and how does that fit into the larger narrative, and then what are the experiences on the ground. So I think that we have the right panel here with us today to help us get a 10,000-foot view of it and work our way down to an actual officer who is in the schools and who can give us his perspective. So I'm very happy today that we have with us Karen Keys-Gamarra, who is the board member at large for Fairfax County Public Schools. And so I'm just going to ask, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce yourself. I'm going to say your name. If you can introduce yourself and kind of a sense of what you would like for people to learn during our time together.
Thank you, Ramona. I am Karen Keys-Gamarra. I am one of 3 at-large school board members for Fairfax County Public Schools. And I welcome this opportunity to be able to talk about SROs being incorporated into our school system. My goal today is to really broaden the discussion. I've listened to a number of people across sectors of our community. And I think that it's really important that we learn to listen to one another. I've heard lots of laudable information about the value that SROs brings to our school. And I've also heard concerns from members of our community about what that means in terms of the disproportionality of discipline numbers for FCPS, as well as all across the state. I also think it's important to recognize that our students don't exist in a vacuum, and they are very, very much aware of what is happening in our communities. They're watching the news, they're seeing the videos, and I can tell you as one who in her day job works with students on a regular basis, and they are to some extent afraid. I had a young man tell me yesterday, Miss Karen, I just don't go outside. And so we need to recognize the realities of how our students are feeling. We need to recognize the realities of what our administrators are feeling that they need. And we need to talk about what the role of the SRO is, as well as how best to address those concerns. And so my primary goal is to facilitate the discussion, because I really do think that we all need to hear one another.
Thank you so much, and we're really happy to have you here today. And now we will have Dr. Copeland from who's the principal of Westfield High School, to share with us, introduce himself and share with us what he hopes for all of us to learn today. Can you unmute yourself, please? Thank you.
I know better. I thank you for the opportunity to be a panelist tonight. I am the principal at Westfield High School. This is my 6th year as a former math teacher. I love numbers, so here's some numbers for everybody. This is my 6th year. I'm starting my 6th year at Westfield. I've been in Fairfax County schools. This is my 10th year, 16 years as a school-based administrator, 19 years in education. I'm a military retiree, so I started this as a second career. And oh, guess what? I got to be a principal. Love the job. It's a lot of fun. I've also, and I was trying to go back through my mind to remember, I've worked with at least 6 different school resource officers over my career, and 2 at Westfield. So I have had very good experiences with school resource officers over my time as a school-based administrator. They've always been a resource that we've been able to go to, not just for situations involving some possible offense, but also as someone for students to make a connection with. And I'm here to provide a perspective. As one high school principal, I'm here to provide a perspective and my recollection and memories of what they've done in schools, and as a principal, how I've used them in schools to help keep my schools safe, but also as someone for students to make a connection with.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Copeland.
You're welcome.
Lieutenant Hooke.
Thank you, Ramona, and thank you, Shirley, for putting this together. My name is Lieutenant Brendan Hooke. I am the school liaison commander for the police department. So that means my office is in the school's headquarters, and I'm in charge of the SRO program and pretty much anything else that comes up in between the schools and the police department where we need to pass along information or help do crisis management training and plans. I work closely with FCPS's Office of Safety and Security. I've been in this role since about May. It's been interesting time to transition and kind of had to learn really quickly. And it's been at times challenging because of we're all dealing with the pandemic right now, but I'm very proud of the different ways that the police department and the schools have figured out ways to adapt to the pandemic. And something we'll talk about this evening is some of the training for the SROs, and I'm happy to get more into that, but I am extremely proud to say that we completed a week-long SRO school just 2 weeks ago through some really creative problem solving and hard work by a sergeant, Brett Choice, and one of my master police officers, Steve Richards, in the program. And we had to figure out how to bring 50 officers together, both virtually and in person, different instructors for different time slots. And it wasn't easy, and they just did a fantastic job with that because when schools do open back up, our SROs need to be ready and trained, and this is a priority for the police department to be ready. So school is opening virtually, but when the building's open and the SROs hopefully are back in there, we will be ready to go. And we are in compliance with all our training, and this training is a huge point of pride for the SROs. And while I'm new to the program, I've been so impressed by the SROs' professionalism and the pride they take in their work. They really are specialists, and they enjoy being positive role models for the students that they interact with. So that has been surprising for me. A little bit about myself: been with the police department 16 years, been a supervisor about 7 years, and I was recently promoted to command level. My last assignment, I was a supervisor of the digital forensics section. So maybe at a future meeting, I can happily, or at least knowledgeably, inform others about some of the dangers of use on the internet and some of the negative consequences of bad behavior there. And we're also making adjustments for the virtual school year to deal with some of the misconduct that may occur there. And I'm happy to talk about that later as well. But I've gone on long enough, so I'll turn it back to you, Ramona.
Okay, thank you so much. And then Master Police Officer Gleason, who was actually a school resource officer, would you please share with us who you are and where you are in your role as a school resource officer? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muted at some point and they sent me a message. I forgot to unmute myself. My name is Mark Gleason. I'm a Fairfax County raised student, and I went off to school and I came back and I became a police officer in this police department in 1994. Spent a few years and a few different assignments, and around 2000 I was approached by command, and my commander at the time offered me an opportunity to get into the school system as a school resource officer. I accepted that position, and for my first 10 years, I was at Robinson Secondary. That's located near George Mason University. I learned right off the bat that it becomes a village very, very quick with all of the different folks that you're going to interact with. It's not just kids and it's not just parents, it's administrators, your counselors, it's your special ed teachers, it's your security team, it's your director of student activities, otherwise known as athletic directors back when I grew up. You have a massive amount of interactions and connections. Those kids, they see us, they know what we do. The job has definitely changed over the past 20 years. We, unfortunately, because of some of the tragic events that have occurred in schools, our training ramped up quite a bit in how to respond to those threats should we have to face them in the school environment. And that is, just one of the things I think that was out there probably in the media for years, is that we were responding. Post-Columbine, the answer was obviously something needed to change in that response. But what is always kind of improving, progressing, or moving along is the way that we're interacting with all the different staff members, the parents, the folks in juvenile intake. You know, a lot of people don't realize that you know, that the shift for providing our students in Virginia for an opportunity to seek diversion, or the programs that you mentioned, the restorative justice, the AAP, those things have been going on for a few years now. This isn't something that just popped out. And because Fairfax is a leader, and as you most know, Fairfax is a leader in a lot of different ways. It's regarded very highly, not just within our state, but within the country, the region for sure. And that's not just our school system. It's not just our county government. It's not just our police department. It's all of those things. And we have responded as an SRO group with continued training. We had to adjust over the last several years to the new laws that will come out, the new policies as far as juvenile justice system. We've done those things. We realize that our kids are our future. We've had discussions, recently with folks that, anybody that wants to hear. And I think by and large, most people realize we really do want to help these kids. Obviously, we have some challenges at times, but the vast majority of these kids, they grow up, and we need to help them do that as best we can. We also need to keep our schools safe. We need to make sure that our young people don't feel like they have to live in fear walking down a hallway, or be bothered, or be bullied, or any of those types of things. There's so many different things out now with technology. That's been a big change that I've noticed in the 20 years. There's so much out there that we have to be concerned about. But I can tell you that I just recently reconnected with a student who I had multiple occasions to deal with 20 years ago. And this young man sent me a letter, and he basically explained that he wanted to thank me for my efforts, as well as a probation officer in the juvenile justice system. That probation officer, myself, his name is John Thompson. We worked with this young man on several occasions, and unfortunately they weren't, because he was making the best decisions. We had to, at a certain point, try to switch it up. The consequences really weren't working for this young man. He was running out of time. We knew high school was going to be tricky to navigate the very ending. He was able to do that. College wasn't going to be an immediate response, or immediate, an immediate thing that he could do. So the military became an option. But not only was that going to be a challenge, we had to make some decisions on our end. The young man was on probation. He was on probation multiple times, not just not with me and Mr. Thompson. There's other officers involved. But at the very end, myself and Mr. Thompson, we agreed that something needs to change. We advocated in the court to a judge to release this young man early from probation. And when we did that, he was able to get himself into the military. And a few years down the road, this young man shows up to my high school while I'm working in a full Class A uniform. And he wanted to let me know that he had turned the corner. He let me know that he had just served overseas, over in Afghanistan, and that he was ready to and prepared to re-up for another tour and to head back. But he was able, this young man who had only, 6 years before at the time, had gotten into quite a bit of trouble. He was able to obtain a security clearance. He was able to go ahead and get a job in the civilian world on this side. When he reached out to me not too long ago, he was living in the Research Triangle in the North Carolina area. He has since moved back home up, and I mean to the Northern Virginia area, because he's taken on an even better opportunity here. He made it very clear that if we had not intervened, not just the times when he was, doing things that he shouldn't have been doing, but at the very end when we gave this kid an opportunity, that he doesn't know where he'd be. He's got 2 kids now. He's married. He owns a house right up here in the confines of the county. And he has a great job, and he's living well. And I just visited him last week. And we saw face to face after 20 years of not seeing each other, and he's doing much better. The only thing I'll wrap this up on with that is those experiences or that experience, it may not be the same for every officer, the way it rolled out, but I can tell you that we're not unique in the way that we respond to our kids. I'm sure our other 50 SROs could tell you similar stories, similar ways that they have helped kids. I remember one athlete that was struggling to get into a college, and I drove all the way down to Blacksburg to help this athlete, not with him in the car. I drove after the school year was over, and I went and spoke to a coach. And I did that on my own dime. I didn't ask the department or anything like that. We do things like that. We advocate. We are folks that want to see these kids succeed. Bottom line is they're our future, but we also got to watch out for them now, as well as everybody else in the system. And I'll end it up right there, and I'll answer questions later.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's important for people to know about the human impact that SROs have. And I think it would help us if we start off by sharing really the definition of what an SRO is. So I'm not sure, maybe Lieutenant Hooke, that's for you to share with us, like what an SRO is and why we have them in the schools. And just because we are in a new era of virtual learning, what does that look like now? And I guess so for Dr. Copeland, Lieutenant Hooke, and MPO Gleason, so a definition of an SRO, how we came to this place where we have them in the schools in the first place, and now how do you plan to function and operate now that we are virtual? And Dr. Copeland, like how will you plan to use SROs, either virtually or in person? So I don't know, Lieutenant Hooke, if you want to start with that.
So if you want to talk about the history of the SRO program, that portion I'm going to defer to Mark because Mark's been doing it for so long and is quite an expert on it. The role of the SRO is one of a mentor. They're there to keep the schools and students safe, to facilitate a safe learning environment. The priority is that we do not disturb the learning environment, and then actually we make sure that it's safe. SROs can, a lot of them coach teams. Some of them will teach classes, and we have guidelines for how that curriculum is developed, and it is in tandem with the principal and different approved curriculum. They will investigate crimes that are reported to them that happen within the school. A lot of times they will mentor students, and they're a role model as well. So I think that's what they are. What they aren't, and this is laid out in the memorandum of understanding, is a disciplinarian for the school. They're not allowed to be involved in school discipline at all. So the MOU, which is available on the FCPS website, lays this out in more detail, but I think that's a good high-level discussion of it. As far as virtual school goes, most of the SROs during the pandemic have returned to patrol because they are each assigned to a patrol district. There are a small number of SROs that are assigned to a virtual investigations team. So this is, unfortunately, they've already been busy because misconduct will happen in the virtual environment. The reports will be routed to them, and they're going to be responsible for follow-up investigation. We've gotten them some training through the National White Collar Crime Center, which specializes in cybercrime investigations, and an emphasis on SRO training this year was on digital investigations as well. I think I answered most of those questions there. And again, for more detail, the SRO MOU is publicly available on the FCPS website. But I think for the history portion, I would defer to MPO Gleason. And then if there are any follow-on questions, Ramona, I'm happy to answer. But I think also Dr. Copeland and Ms. Keys-Gamarra can answer some of their perspective on what they perceive the SRO to be.
Yep. All right. Gentleman, Dr. Copeland.
Sure. So I would just I would just, so picking up the roles of the SRO, and I'm going to speak because of the agreement between the police and the division was recently updated. I'm speaking in terms of roles and responsibilities that they've had in the past, or at least up to this school year. Obviously, our SROs are present, or at least mine is a presence in the school, meaning that he is visible during class changes and he has a prominent place in our school. That is a non-threatening presence, meaning that he's right outside at door 1, standing there greeting students as they come in. I'm very fortunate in that my SRO transitioned from a middle school. So his first 2 years at Westfield, he was seeing the same kids who he had seen in middle school. Yep. And if you can relate to being a high schooler showing up, relate to being a middle schooler showing up at high school, a familiar face is something that's great. So, I mean, I was standing out there with him the first days, and you see kids walk up and just run up to him and hug him, because they were like, wow, at least I know one person in this huge building. Oh, by the way, we got over 2,600 students. So that was definitely a plus. He brings expertise, because they're obviously, I'm a school-based administrator. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a person who's learned in overall law or criminal law. So he's someone who provides us with a level of expertise when we have obviously bad situations that happen in the school. For example, the SRO is the only person in the school building who has the ability to test something that we may suspect of being a controlled substance. And he's the only one who can confirm that, yeah, this is or is not what it is. Our SRO has done training with students in classes, government classes where we talk about criminal law, but also he did, and this had gone on for 2 or 3 years, he conducted a class for our female students on self-defense. So he taught some basic self-defense techniques, and it was actually very well attended. What we found out was, the young ladies had concerns about their physical safety, and they wanted to know and learn how to respond in a way that would at least get them out of a situation, not to be able to fight, but to be able to escape. And lastly, he's a resource for the rest of the staff. Educators being educators, it's always good to have someone who doesn't do what you do to be able to talk to and get another perspective. So I've been very, very, very happy with Officer Lawson. He's a good man at heart. He's always willing to help. He pitches in. And to his credit, and I'll say to the culture that I've established at the school, I don't involve him in things that we should be able to handle at our level. And he respects that. And as a result, we've had, and I foresee us continuing to have a great relationship. I'll even add one more situation or instance. For whatever reason, when school's out and kids find themselves in trouble, their first response, depending on what it is often not to call the police directly, but to either call the principal or email the principal and tell him what happened. Well, if kids do something outside of school, I have no recourse to that. So I've had situations where they've responded and CC'd him in the email, and his response back to me, while not on duty, is, hey, I'll take care of this. Because he either knows the student, because he's met them in school, not in a contentious way, but because, hey, he has a relationship with them. And that's one of the hidden treasures in this, because now you've got an officer, because he is still a police officer, but it's someone that they know by name, and that relationship has been established. So that's what I've done.
MPO Gleason, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? You're muted. Oh,
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To go back on the history just a little bit, and it won't take too long. Our SRO program started in '94. It was actually the year that I became a sworn officer, so I wasn't involved in the program yet. And at the time, I believe it was just high schools had an officer, and then I believe at the time we hadn't covered middle schools yet. And what they did was they assigned an officer that could check in basically on a few middle schools. They found that, obviously pretty quickly that model doesn't really work. You have to have somebody entrenched, somebody that is a resource, somebody that is available, somebody that the kids can relate to, day to day. Keep in mind, Columbine was 5 years after our program started. We were already ahead of the curve. That's something that that, our training changed, but at least as a county, as a school system, as a government, we should all be very proud that, when we made the decision to get into the schools with the relationship that we, forged with the school system and administration, that provided, probably a head start over some programs, because quite frankly, obviously all these other things that happen over time, you look back and you're glad, hey, at least, we had made headway. We had started our venture into this, and then we all remember days like 9/11 and all those things. I can tell you exactly where I was that moment. I was in an office at Robinson, and it was just, everybody knows where they were in certain moments. So, but to touch on the relationships, he's absolutely right. Dr. Copeland, touched on the relationships. And for me, I went the opposite route. Although Robinson is a secondary school, meaning it has the middle and the high school, I did get to see kids for 6 years, at least for 3 or 4 of those cycles in my 10 years there. But now in my middle school, where I'm at Poe Middle School in Annandale, I have 6th graders in my school, and not every middle school has that. That provides some comfort level for a lot of those kids, families as well. But the relationships are real. I can tell you that kids, they may, some of them may have a rough or gruff approach to you at times. They may joke with you. They may have nicknames for you sometimes. And actually, some of them actually they're more out of them just trying to be funny. And if you can roll with that, it works. I have a mentee that I have had for 2 years, and just spoke with him recently. And I told him I know, although we're going virtual, that I would like to continue that relationship with him. It doesn't preclude me from having relationships to work with other kids. But this young man, I usually am asked by the school counseling office, the guidance office. They select a kid that they think that I could work with. We'll do lunch once a week, where he gets to come hang out with me in my office, or the library where it's a little bit quieter. We can chat, catch up. I can talk to him and bounce things off of him. He can do the same with me. But for me, it's more not about trying to be the educator that the folks in the building do, but it's mostly about, etiquette, manners, hold the door for the people that are coming through. If somebody drops a book, on the floor, book bag, help them pick them up. Don't hesitate, even if you don't know them. Holidays, I send them off with, some, things that I think you might be able to benefit from, wool socks one year, some toiletries another, stuff like that. And, but I just spoke with him recently, and I said, I know this new year is going to be different. I want you to talk with your parents, and if we can work it out safely, I'd still like to continue on the mentorship, but it'll be obviously a lot more distance right now. But I said, if there's a way that we can safely still maybe continue our weekly meal, that I'd like to do that. And he was all in for that. He's a kid that's learned a lot over the last couple of years with me. I've learned a lot with him. And the mentorships at our school, they're usually one per year. You try to, deal with the kid. But this one, I just basically said, look, 1 year is not going to be enough. And he gravitated, back towards me the second year, and then now this third year. So the relationships are important. I still keep in touch with not just the young man I mentioned before. That was more of a surprise for me, but the many athletes that I coached in my sport, that I coached for 10 years when I was at Robinson. Many of them went off to school, not necessarily to go continue competition, but to go get their educations and go move on with life. Some of them did. And it's very fulfilling, because you never know what path these kids are going to take. You just know that they're eventually going to find success if you keep guiding them towards it.
Thank you. Thank you again for that very thoughtful response. I want to shift our conversation a little bit because we know that both the schools and Fairfax County government have adopted a One Fairfax policy. And we do have a question around training for the SROs. And if there's any cultural responsiveness, anti-bias, anti-racism training for the SROs, you mentioned that things change, and as our communities change and become more diverse, how are SROs being trained in that way? And if they're not, are there plans to include that in their training? How are they, being given those types of trainings? So anyone can jump in.
Hey, Ramona, I'll field that. And if I may add on to just something I want to clarify from the previous question. While the SROs are largely back in patrol, as you heard from Mark, they are maintaining these relationships. And that has been our direction to them as a department. Reach out to your administration, let them know you're still a member of, a team there, and they are staying involved when appropriate, and they're being given flexibility to do so. So to move on to your question about training, this past couple of years, the MOU has mandated that we have cultural proficiency and implicit bias training. We've had it the last couple of years. It's a week-long school with a lot of different topics that are covered. That subject covers several hours, but it's a theme throughout the week-long school. And we did complete it this year as well. And our school took place the week of August 10th. So we did cover that in our training. And every SRO is required to also, within 6 months of assignment, complete that school. And then also our crisis intervention training that incorporates the bias training as well, and de-escalation and awareness of how to handle people in mental health crisis. So these are pretty high standards. It's dictated by the MOU, and now it's dictated by Virginia law. So we, again, as Mark pointed out, we were ahead of law, and that's something that's pretty consistent for our agency, that we try to lead on these type of things.
Thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, do you have anything you would like to say about that training?
Actually, our board is waiting on additional reports to us to see the effectiveness of the changes of not just the SR&R, but the MOU. The goal was to, make sure that SROs were not involved in those discipline actions, because we didn't want that to contribute in any way to disproportionality. We also wanted to make sure that training was available, not only in de-escalation, but to also make sure that there was always an improvement with respect to cultural understanding. I shy away from the phrase cultural competency because I don't think any of us ever actually arrives. It is an ongoing learning process. And so we have not, I will say the school board has not received that report as of yet. I know what the thinking was behind the changes in the MOU and the SR&R, but we're still looking to have those numbers in front of us. I will say from this conversation, I know that there are lots of positive things that people have to say. I would like to see, as we go forward, a more of a cut across all of the communities, because I do know that people, in light of today, what people are experiencing and watching, that there is some fear of the police. And that's not to say that our SROs aren't contributing at all. And so you mentioned one Fairfax, and I actually think one of the next steps should be, how do we address and make sure that people in our community, especially in our schools, feel comfortable. I know that there are a number of people that have positive relationships. I'm not sure that all students are feeling that way, not based on some of the things that I'm hearing from students. And so I don't want to act as though we are unaware of those feelings, and we do need to have a healthy response to that so that we can bring everybody to the table and feel that they have a voice in this discussion.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to add to that, the training, the lens of using equity with SROs, how that can be applied even I know we have some data. So Lieutenant Hooke, I don't know if you would like to share some of that data now for maybe all of us to have a chance to kind of look at. You can talk us through some of what you have.
Sure. Absolutely. Just give me one moment to adjust here, and I'm going to share my screen to go through some of these things. And I saw a question pop up on there. The SROs attend specific training for SROs, and it's a biannual training. So there's a basic and then an advanced school that they all have to go through, just to clarify that.
And that's separate from
the basic academy.
Right.
It's on, as Ms. Keys-Gamarra pointed out, it's an ongoing, and we're constantly striving to improve.
Okay, thank you.
While he's looking for that, can I add something on the training?
Okay.
When I first started, you know, obviously the program had been around for a few years, but there really wasn't, you know, a one defined training. What ended up happening when I first trained was we sent officers all around the country to SRO schools, and what we found out was we could prepare ourselves much better. We got the curriculum. We constantly update. We run our own SRO school now, and quite frankly, on normal years, it's not just Fairfax County SROs in there for that weekly 40-hour school. There are other requests from around the region and the state to send officers up to our SRO school.
Okay, thank you for that.
So the screen I'm sharing right now is a website that is out of UVA, and it's based on data they collect through the schools and the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So this is a survey the schools conduct, and this is statewide, this data right here, but it breaks down by race. The statement, the SRO makes me feel safer at school, and you can review it on your own, but overwhelmingly across all races here, the answer is majority yes. There is a portion that the answer is no, and you know, we're always striving to improve that, and we do need to address that, but the majority is yes. I'm going to share some more here. So this is, again, from the Virginia Secondary School Climate Survey from 2020, and you see here the same type of data. This is the staff perceptions of school resource officers from 2020 in Virginia. And you can see staff strongly support SROs in school. It breaks it down by teachers, administration, and other staff. And again, if you go back to that UVA website that I shared, you can drill down and pull out the PDFs on your own. Again, from that same climate survey, the statement was students are treated fairly regardless of their race or ethnicity. And you can break it down, but the strong majority believe either agree or strongly agree that they are. And that's not necessarily a reflection of interactions with SROs, it's the school climate. So SROs, school security, teachers, principals, the whole administration there. And student perceptions of belonging at school. Again, some more of the same data. And again, this was generated from UVA. I'm now sharing the arrest data. And again, this is on the FCPS website right here that I clicked on. If you go down, you can go to the 2018-2019 annual review, and you can go to the summary annual report data. I don't want to read line by line the statistics because you can pull up this data on your own, but there is something I would like to highlight.
Are you able to make that a little bit bigger? Is there?
One moment. I'm having some, I have too many screens going at once here, so. It's a pretty consistent trend that the number of events reported to police are generated via entities other than the SRO. So it's not as if the SROs are out there looking to create investigations or arrests on students. Only 6% of incidents, and I'm going to clarify some other things here in a minute with definitions, but only 6% were generated by the SRO. Most of them were referred to them. The reason I find this important to highlight is that the SROs are skilled and trained, and they are invested in the school community. They are a member of that community. So by them being in there, 100% of those cases are handled by an expert who is bound by the MOU between the schools and the police department. If they were not, then the MOU would not necessarily have the same type of implication. But the SROs are one of the largest points we have on training is the MOU and its requirements and its philosophies, in that we are here for students to succeed and to divert as many as possible. And I'll get to diversion in one moment. But in conversations with Ms. Ginwright, sometimes police are guilty of getting hung up in jargon and maybe using terms that are familiar to us but not to the public. So when we talk about arrests, these are referrals to the court system. The number of students that were actually physically arrested and removed from a school during any of these years is in the single digits. But because the FBI defines what an arrest is for our record management system, we record these as arrests. And from a civil liberties perspective, it's important that the police consider this an arrest, because when you are arrested, then you have certain rights that attach, and we need to make sure that we are honoring those rights. But if you look at this data provided by the courts, 70% of the referrals made by SROs in 2019-2020 were eligible for diversion, and SROs abide by the diversion first policy. So some of the diversion is going to be through the alternative accountability program, which I understand is going to be a topic on another day. And then some of it is through different diversions related to drug and alcohol or mental health. But the point being, we are trying to use the courts to improve the students and not to punish. So of the intakes eligible for diversion, only 9% were petitioned to court. Some of that might be because of a student deciding they don't want diversion, or a victim not wanting diversion, but it's never going to be the officer not wanting diversion. So I just think that's an important statistic to share, in that we are doing our best to divert students away from receiving criminal sentences. But some of the terminology we use doesn't always match up with the public perception. So I'm going to stop sharing now so others can comment and review as they see fit.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'd like to, I don't know if he can show the page of the students that felt safe and, you know, those that didn't feel safe, because I think we, as a school board member, my goal is to make sure that we are creating an environment. No, you had some numbers from a survey. Yes. Our goal, at least my goal as one board member, let me speak for myself, is to remove any barriers to access to education. And so while it's great to look at these numbers of, you know, agree 53, 52, 55, 53, it's extremely concerning to me to see close to over 20% in one category, 18%, 19, 17%, particularly when we look at disproportionate numbers of discipline. We know that we have higher numbers of students involved in special education. We know that we have higher numbers of Black and brown kids. And those are students who can more easily feel marginalized in the educational environment. And so while I'm really glad to see these positive numbers, I would caution us as we have this discussion to not disregard these other numbers, because those are the students that we tend to lose. Those are the students that do experience, in my opinion, greater discipline. And those are the students that I would be worried about having access to education. So I wanted to make sure that while I understand there are many, many positives, seeing numbers this high is very concerning to me. And that's why I think we need to have greater conversation about what this program is what this program entails, what accountability measures we have for our officers when they're in our schools. I know that we have the MOU, but I think that when you have the county, Fairfax County, as well as the school providing some sort of combined supervision, that is an invitation for things to fall through the cracks. And so those are the things where I think we can grow. I think we've got a lot of positives here, but I do believe that we can also improve.
So I'm now sharing data specific to Fairfax County that was prepared by DCJS. It's not broken down by race or ethnicity, and this is not data that I possess or have any control over, but this is specific to Fairfax County. Again, not broken down by race or ethnicity, but it's a little more positive than the rest of the state. So, and it's hard for me to toggle back and forth because it's different programs and different screens I'm sharing. So you'll see that in Fairfax County, over 80% agree that the SRO makes them feel safer at school. And then you can see the corresponding numbers on the other side. Still too high disagree or strongly disagree, and we need to improve that. But as far as Virginia goes, Fairfax County is leading the way. Not to say that there's not plenty of areas where we can improve, but we are ahead of the rest of the state.
So we did receive some questions about data around special education. And I don't know if we have that shows special education students and their interactions with SROs. I don't know if we have data that's broken down.
As a police department, we're hesitant to track data that we're not supposed to track. So I don't think, while that might be useful, and the schools could certainly track that, the police department does not want to track which students and create a record that is commingled with criminal justice records of whether someone's got some sort of disability or something like that. So we don't track that because, again, the flip side of that is now the police are singling people out.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Copeland, did you have anything you would like to add to this conversation about data and cultural, well, I'm not going to say competency, but cultural awareness, One Fairfax, and how that relates to SROs and anything along those lines?
Sure. I think this is truly a double-edged sword in this respect. As an African-American male, I understand where any African-American person who has had a bad interaction with a police officer or who watches the incidents that happen in our society and has concerns for their safety. I get it. And I think, one of the things I say to my staff in conversations is, we've got to not be tone deaf. You can't be tone deaf to the realities of what's going on around us. At the same time, I'm fortunate in that I'm interacting with police officers, and not just, and I'll give you an example, not just my own SRO, but I'm fortunate enough that at our sporting events, he brings in road officers who then they get to see me not as some guy out there. And oh, by the way, I ride a motorcycle. So you don't see me maybe dressed up in a sports coat and tie and stuff like that. You see me in my gear. I look like any other guy out there. So I get it. You're concerned. But I also get that, if there's anything to be said about the value of communication and getting to know someone outside of just being a suit or a uniform, those opportunities have to be provided. I'm older, so I've got a history, and fortunately, I've managed to stay out of bad situations, and my record's clean. But for that young person who's building that, and who's learning, hey, how like I said, school is a lot. We're doing a lot of academic learning, but we're also doing a lot of social learning also. Mm-hmm. This is the one opportunity, and I feel it's my responsibility as principal to make sure that more likely than not, that interaction with a school resource officer is going to be positive, meaning I don't put myself or a student in a position where it's necessary for an officer to either be physical with them or have to bring a level of authority and force, not necessarily physical, but just a presence that may not be what a student would traditionally see. Mm-hmm. I feel that I own that. And I feel that, so I'm trying to create sort of I'll call it a utopia, but it's not. It's the realities of, hey, people are more than who you see them as when they're at work. So like I said, it's a double-edged sword. I clearly see both sides of it. As an education professional working in a building with 2,600 kids and over 260 adults, and as African-American male interacting in society. Mm-hmm. So, it's where do I stand? Depends on what I'm wearing at the time and what I'm doing.
Dr. Copeland, if I may ask you, how do you make sure that those interactions are positive?
One of the things is I adhere, and maybe it's my military background. I follow the rules and regulations as they're written. If you tell me, hey, you're not, there are only certain times that an SRO is supposed to be involved, then let's say I got a kid who's acting out. He or she may be cursing profusely and refusing to follow instructions. That's not a police situation. That's just disruptive to the school at that time. But I've got some other things I can do. I can close some classroom doors and I can give that kid his or her moment. I'm not so old that I don't understand, hey, they're kids, as I always tell parents. They're kids. They're not going to react necessarily the way I would want. And God knows they're not always going to do 100% what we ask of them. But as human beings, I know that people also, when they're upset, that's the worst time to be trying to tell somebody to do something. So I give them their time to calm down. And I don't bring an SRO into those situations. And again, I will say, I've been fortunate in that I've had SROs who understood that. They don't even try to come into the area, to be like, okay, I'm behind the scenes and I'm waiting for something to happen so I can jump in. There are no weapons involved. No one has been assaulted. So we have skills in this respect. We do have skills, the ability to talk people down using our voice, using our proximity, using other strategies to help them calm down and then putting them in a better place. And 9.5 times out of 10, what I've observed is the kid, in reflection on it and looking back, goes, that probably wasn't the best me that I showed them, and I should have done better. Whether or not I get an apology is irrelevant. They're learning something, and that's for me is a win.
I do have a follow-up question. I'm trying not to dominate the conversation, but I would say probably 95% of the kids in your schools aren't getting in trouble, right? And so
I'm doing the math going, what's 5%? It's lower than that, actually. It's actually lower than that. It's actually, if you really press me, I say somewhere less than 1%.
Right. So the majority,
it's a very small number.
The greater majority of your students are not getting in trouble, are not needing interaction potentially with an officer. And so I would like to expand that question and say, for that 99%, how are we making sure that they're having positive perceptions, that they are not dealing with the trauma of some of the things that I know they're seeing on TV? you know, one of the questions I saw in the chat is, what does FCPS plan to do to improve the situation? I think part of it, for me personally, is having a real honest discussion. You know, I know that whenever we bring this up, people, you know, kind of get a little rod in their back and don't take our SROs away. I don't think that's what this is about. I think this is about having that genuine conversation, because we do have students who have told me how they feel when they are around police officers. We can't, as you said, be tone deaf to that. And how do we get to a better place? Because this is a real learning opportunity, because we've got crazy stuff going on all over the nation. And how do we help our kids deal with that, especially when, you know, seeing an officer walk around the schools, and I'm assuming they have their weapon. What does that mean to our kids, and how do we deal with that?
I would, you know, one of the things that I haven't seen beyond this session is we've never, and so I'll speak as a principal, I've never had given my SRO an opportunity to have a town hall with my parents, with my students. I talk to them all the time, the administrators, counselors, teachers, but them having that one-on-one, as you said, that opportunity to now, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what my role is here. Now, I've read the MOU, but you know, most, and it's in the student rights and responsibilities, but most kids and parents don't read it until something's happened, and now all of a sudden it's the most important document in the world, and they're trying to parse every word possible. Whereas if you meet the SRO in advance, you have an opportunity to find out, wow, that's not what I expected. You know, even as people come and go in my building, the SRO has a office right in my main office, right up front. Not because I'm trying to have some type of threatening presence, but there are parents who, quite frankly, come in, things have happened in the community, and they're referred there. So, and instead of them wandering throughout the school to try and find the SRO, they go right there, they interact, and they go right out the building. We maintain a degree of confidentiality, and they're able to immediately see them without their kid possibly knowing that they were in school for whatever it was. So I think that, and that's just one example, but having those opportunities for the SRO to interact with kids in a town hall type setting, similar to this, and with parents, can turn a lot of this around. And I want to be even more specific. I think that, you know, I have a fairly substantial population of English language learners. And I'm doing everything I can to make connections with those parents. Because for me, if I get them to understand what my business is and what my role is as a principal, and how important it is to me for my overall school success, that they support what I'm trying to do in terms of learning, then and who's in the building, not just the psychologists and teachers and social workers, but also why that officer's there. I think that's another plus for me, because that's one I think is sometimes not spoken of. And I've had parents report back through in terms of, hey, my parents won't come here, or kids, my parents won't come here because of that. I think we can get away from a lot of that and mitigate a lot of that by saying, hey, here's a town hall, here's a forum in which you can see this person, and he or she can explain to you what they do in the building. And then all of a sudden we can make some progress. I hope that answered the question.
I think it's a good way to start. I think there's a lot of ground to cover when we're talking about 99% of the students are not having to have the kind of interaction that our MOU would require. And I think that we have to be open to those discussions. I hear lots of, you know, if we look at our panel today, we've got a lot of officers, we got a lot of pro SRO folks on this panel. And I want to make sure that those students who are having genuine feelings and the families that are having genuine concerns feel that their voices can be heard as well. Because the fact of the matter is, how they feel when they walk through that door impacts their ability to access education. And that's my bottom line.
I agree. And if I could just add one small thing to that, you know, we don't know who those kids were who said that they didn't feel safe or disagreed with the statement. But I mean, you know, I've had students who I'm sure have had no history or negative involvement with law enforcement, and they've expressed not a fear, but a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know that everybody's aware, for the most part, that, you know, I had a Black Lives Matter, I don't call them protests. It was an event. It was a gathering because they weren't protesting. The police supported that by making sure that traffic was properly managed. Now, the event was more or less rained down, but their plan to walk from Westfield to a large shopping strip mall area during rush hour. And they had made no plans or coordination to do that. Now, I remember, and I just want to expose this because it really shows a level of understanding and something that wasn't known on the public side. I was the liaison between the student, or a former Westfield student, who was coordinating this event, and the police. And I remember the lieutenant, he said, would you mind asking them if they would communicate with us? He was situationally aware. He knew enough to know, hey, I just can't, I'm there to make sure that things are safe. He also wanted to make sure that they were going to be safe, given all the things going on. It was 2 phone calls. Will you talk to them? And they were more than willing. Yeah, be safe. And we're not here to destroy anything. And what ended up happening, instead of a walk, it became a convoy, but they still provided support. And the support made sure that we were able to get through traffic lights safely, and traffic was still able to flow. Those are behind the scene things that, you know, you don't know about, because again, and communication is a part of that, because, you know, sometimes we're standing off just looking at people going, I think I know what you think or how you feel, and that may not be the case. I know, I'm old enough to know that's not an absolute statement for everyone, but we make that first step to go, or at least have that first communication to go, hey, I need to find out. And you won't find out by simply looking at each other.
Thank you. Now, Shirley, I see you jumped on. So did you want to make a statement before I go into the, you're gone. Oh, there you go. Did you want to make a statement before I go on to the next? Because I want to pick up on something that Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Oh, no, I did want to make a statement, because Karen made a statement that most of the panelists are pro SROs, and I don't think that's the case. But there are a lot of these students, in which we're working on, who are minorities, do have negative interfacing with our police officers. And that's why we're trying to work on that, you know, through the Communities of Trust Committee. So some of them are going to come into the schools with that negative connotation. And I've spoken with some, and it's hard for them as well. But this discussion is about their roles and responsibilities, not who's pro, and we're not discussing whether or not they should or should not be in the schools, because there are different opinions on that as well. So regardless of who we interact with, you know, we all are not going to have the same experience. So I just wanted to make that clear, that I asked each individual to be a panelist based upon their experience and their roles and responsibility, based upon the memorandum of understanding that was approved 2 years ago, and from what I understand, will be changed again in a couple of months because of legislation that has been changed. So, and Brenda might want to talk about that later on. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to pick up on one thing that was kind of like a thread. We talked about training and the types of training that the SRO officers receive, but I think the issue around either perception or real life experiences, how, you know, with law enforcement, whether, you know, it's like with county people, you're the county. It doesn't matter which department you work for, you're the county. And when with law enforcement, if you are an officer, if you're SRO, or if you're a patrolman, or if you're the chief, you're still an officer. And sometimes people's, whether it's perception or their lived experience, and given the climate of our country and our county, at times, what is there training? Are there discussions? Because I think it is part of about having that open and honest conversation. And not that there is a silver bullet. I'm not suggesting that, but are those types of conversations of how do we reduce some of those barriers to help families who may be reluctant because of either personal experiences or things that they're seeing on the news? I like that Dr. Copeland talked about a town hall. I think that is a good step. But what other things have you all officers have you all thought of, or maybe have been suggested, or maybe has this sparked anything to think about? What are some other ways that can reduce some of those barriers of building that relationship that the SROs seek to have with the students who are in our schools?
So I can answer from a department level and then kind of more specific to the schools, Ramona. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer this question. It's not that there's a particular training, but engaging the community members in every neighborhood is something that is encouraged department-wide. This summer, early on, through Communities of Trust, Ms. Ginwright gave me the opportunity to attend a meeting at a church off of Route 1 of young members of Black Lives Matter. And, I wish the media had seen this, because what occurred that day was empathy and love, listening and understanding. And there was that fear that some of the attendees had seeing the uniform. But as the meeting went on, we joked around a little bit. We talked about common interests. And by the end of the night, I was hanging around after my shift to talk to them, and the meeting was over and we were hanging out and we were relating to each other at a very human level. And that's what we want. We love our community. So from a philosophical point of view, that's encouraged throughout the department. And from more of like a program view, every station through Communities of Trust and elsewhere have community days. The pandemic has made this a little difficult, and I'll get to some of the ways we're trying to get around some of that. But community public safety days, where maybe we'll have a number of specialized units and vehicles and equipment that young people might find interesting out there. We'll probably have the canine unit out there. And that's something that we do on an ongoing basis. It's not one and done. We also try to recruit from the community, and something we've done to do that is we now have a recruiting RV bus, so we can go to a particular community and try to recruit right there and do the initial background investigation right then and there, because we need to reflect the community that we serve. Every station has also created community outreach officers. So their specific goal is to set up events like some of the ones I've described. And the person who helped organize this meeting today, Officer Hawkins, who's on this call, is one of those community outreach officers. We also have a number of programs designed to reach out to youth, whether it's leadership programs. We have the Public Safety Cadet Program, which is for youth under the age of 18, where they can, it used to be through the Boy Scouts and the Explorer Scouts, but now we've created a different model, and that's to teach them about law enforcement, to give them an opportunity to volunteer in their community, and we like to convert them when possible into officers, and that's what we would like to see. And if not, they've learned some life skills. They've got to maybe demystify some of the myths about law enforcement, and put a human face on us. And we do this throughout the county. There's a number of posts. It's not just one, because we're a large county, so we need to be mindful of that equity of, hey, we need somebody down in Mount Vernon and Chantilly and Reston, so and Bailey's Crossroads. So we try to spread that out as much as we can. And then we have the Road Dog program that we do through neighborhoods and community services. And I think I'd like to turn some of this response over to Mark, because he is so passionate about some of this. But I wanted to kind of just touch the overview. As far as the SROs go, before I turn over to Mark, they're encouraged to participate in coaching, teaching, and mentoring. Something that one of the SROs came up with, and as a leader, the best ideas come from the people that you lead, not from me. An SRO out in, I think, Chantilly has come up with a way to do an esports tournament so that he can engage with his students while playing video games. And we're looking at a way to scale that. And we're, there's some technical issues with that, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to do that. We're also looking at ways to bring officers in kind of a safe space so we can have some of those conversations that we need to have. And Ms. Ginwright has kind of been helping us put that together, and we have some officers working on curriculum and identifying officers that would be suitable to have those type of conversations. But I'm going to turn it over to Mark now, and he can speak about the Road Dog program. And then if there's any follow-up questions from any of the other panelists, I'm happy to answer.
Hey guys, my boss is wearing the uniform today, and I had brought my uniform shirt in to do the same, but underneath every single day, I do wear this. I have a few of them over the years. It's our Road Dog staff t-shirt. Road Dog is a program that a former county chair, Sharon Bulova, asked to be created. We didn't have a name. We didn't know what it would look like and how it would morph and develop over the years. But in about 2003, we had some definite issues in a certain part of the county. We were concerned that our young folks would be more susceptible to head into possible gang participation. And the Road Dog camp was created. I was on the original committee that was not just police officers. I was one of the first officers with one other that volunteered to kind of think tank it. But there were people from recreation, juvenile justice, sheriff's department, probation, you name it. So the camp was created. Road Dog is a term that we use for our patrol guys. If you're a patrol officer, you're known as a Road Dog. The DAWG you saw on the shirt right there for us was don't associate with gangs. Over the years, this thing has morphed from just 1 week with one group of kids that our first camp was about 35 kids. We have a full week schedule. It's going to our county facilities to go take a look at some of the things that we have in the police department, the fire department. Lately, in the last couple of years, in my particular camp, because now we've grown into multiple camps that we do across the county during the same week to capture as many students as possible. One of the things I added in was two things. The community service component. We go to one of the food kitchens, the places where they need help setting up donations, stacking, helping to prepare packages to go out to folks who need it. The other thing that we've done is create some recreation out of that at the end of the week. The piece where we do the community service has been actually the last couple of years a big hit with our kids. These are usually going to be middle school age kids, but we will occasionally take a kid that may already be in 9th grade, depending on their age. We're able to accommodate with the help of our folks at NCS. Jonathan Melendez in the last couple of years has said, hey, if you get more than the allotted number for each camp, we have 3 camps and the number was 30 per camp. He was like, hey, look, we weren't hitting those marks in all of our camps because things happen during the summer, and by the end of the summer we had the camp. We've adjusted it by switching it to the front end of the summer. We've also adjusted it by having basically not a restriction on the number of kids. Of course, we can't have a zillion kids, but we can overreach a little bit and the budget will still accommodate the kids. So that has been a huge piece. Now it's not so much about us identifying the kids that we're worried about with potential gang participation. It's really about kids that we want to reach out to give them an opportunity. They may be in a tough neighborhood. They may be in a tough family situation. It doesn't have to be, it's not really a gang thing anymore. It could be that for an officer or a counselor who identifies a kid in the school if they're concerned. But we look at kids who have not taken too big a bite of an apple that might put them in a position where our camp's not necessarily going to help. We want kids that are in challenged neighborhoods or challenging situations. And for a week, we are picking them up. We're feeding them. we're taking them to places. One of the other additions I've added to my weekly schedule is we go to the animal shelter. I want them to see a human side of something else that we have out in society. We're fortunate in our county. We have a fully functioning no-kill shelter. They get to take the tour. So for some of the kids, you know, they may elect not to get as close. It's not like the animals are wandering around unhinged or anything, but some, it's their first experience feeling a little bit more comfortable, and then listening to the folks who are taking care of these animals who have been brought to the shelter. It humanizes a little bit more the work that we do in the county. I know it's, you know, at first I think it sounded kind of corny to some of my other SROs, but it's a positive. You know, we've had this program going strong for, you know, 17 years now, and we get a lot of buy-in from the community. I'm gonna mention a name, and but he is only one of many names out there. But from our very first camp until this most recent one, Jim Rafferty over there at Glory Days in the Burke area, he's also a regional manager for the Glory Days chain. He jumped in on this from the very first year. I went to him and I said, hey, we're trying to put this camp together. We don't know what it's going to look like. We just know it's going to end at this location on this day. He was like, what do you need? And that man, for, you know, the 17 years we've been doing it, basically has provided food for a camp, or most recently, a couple years ago, we did a combined lunch for all 3 camps. So it was, you know, over 130 lunches that he provided. Doesn't charge us a dime. It's not always about that. We do have vendors who we work with, and we have the budget to pay for the meals and the things that we do. Some of the recreational facilities we have, Reston has a slide or a water park out there. I forget what it's called, but we, on our end of the county, where we work in the Mount Vernon Franconia area, we have Pohick Bay Regional Park. So we've incorporated that as the end of the week type of recreation before we send them off. These kids, you know, some of these kids may not have a place to go. They may not have a place they're going to travel in the summer after school. They may have a situation where getting out for the week is important to them. And specifically, I know a couple of our SROs in our last camp identified kids that simply needed to get a different, gulp of air in a week where their family situation was tough, and they made efforts to make sure that the kid was included in our camp, not just for risk factors, but to give them something positive to look forward in the summer. But
I'm looking at our time, so
yeah,
everybody.
Sorry about that.
Oh no, it's okay. I appreciate the passion, and someone did ask about how kids can be referred to the program, so we can send that information out. Links now. You can look into Road Dog and how to get youth involved. I'm going to do. Everyone gets to have a closing remark. So yes, ma'am. You want to?
Before we do that, I do have a question, because one of the things that I think we need to talk about is what happens when an officer does go outside of that role, and how do we maintain accountability? I don't know if any of the officers here can help me to understand that. I know that that's one of the questions that's been brought to me by members of the community. So I'd just like to know how we address that. And that's one of the concerns I have by having both the school and the county work, you know, having this as an initiative, a joint initiative.
So let me just for time's sake, we are at 8:23. So whoever's going to respond, you have 2 minutes, and I'm going to jump in. Okay.
This will be a fairly quick response. So initially, the SROs are selected, and we involve FCPS in the selection process. Typically, the people that are choosing to become SROs and that we select are not going to have these type of problems, but I'm not going to say never. Okay. So if there is an allegation, it's investigated and by the police department, our internal affairs bureau. And if there is a violation, then there will be a punishment. The SROs serve at the schools as a guest of the schools. So if the schools want an SRO removed, that's not necessarily a disciplinary issue. It's something that we would talk about through our chain of command, both the schools and the police department, and come to a decision that way. But if there's an allegation of misconduct or wrongdoing, that gets investigated by either a supervisor or an internal affairs bureau, documented, and then a decision is made by a commander, and that goes up through the chain of command.
Who does that get reported to if a parent has a concern?
I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question. Do you mean the results of the investigation, or do you mean if there's a complaint?
I mean, if a parent has a concern, how do they report that? And then how do we make sure we have a good personality fit for that school?
Okay, so wait 1 second. So I'm looking at our time. I want us to be able to take that conversation offline if we could, to give people the opportunity to kind of make a final statement around SROs in the schools, and so that we do not get kicked off during our meeting, and give everybody opportunity just to say good night and to give a final statement. So Dr. Copeland, I'm going to ask you to jump on if you have any final words that you would like to share.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present tonight. I'm very sorry for darkening my screen, but as you know, this is a very short week for educators, and Tuesday morning, we're expected to welcome kids back to school. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity to represent my colleagues in Fairfax County Public School. I'm very proud to be a principal. I really enjoy the job, and I'm very proud of the work that we do every day. But I'm also very proud of the relationship that I've been able to establish with our school resource officers, not just the one that works in my school, but also many Fairfax County police officers. I, like many people, I'm sure in society, are very sad about where we find ourselves today. This is not a good place to be. I'll tell you right now, I'm 60 years old in July. And I look back and I tell people, you know, it is absolutely incredible. It's almost like I'm reliving a loop. And I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. So when I tell people, I remember driving through South Georgia and not being able to stop at a bathroom. And I remember growing up in Southwest Atlanta on the West End, how, yeah, I get it, not having good relationships with police. That is not the case now, but as I'm watching another generation of young African Americans come along, they're living something that I lived. I hope the majority will be fortunate enough to find themselves where I am today. And I see my role as a principal in a school of trying to promote that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Okay, MPO Gleason, you got 1 second.
Hey guys, I'll keep it real short. From the time I started this over 20 years ago until where we sit today, I can tell you we've done nothing but evolve as a group. You know, we care about these kids. We're willing to work with everybody. We want everybody to, you know, let's have those honest conversations, but at the same time, let's be realistic, understand our job, and understand that the folks that want to do the SRO job, this is not 1,500 officers strong lining up every year wanting to do this. It's a very unique and small group. We understand what our role is. We continue to update it. We work with the schools. We work with juvenile intake. We work with everybody that's out there in between. And at the end of the day, we want success for our kids. Those kids are going to be the ones taking care of our community when we finish up. I'm in overtime right now. I could have retired a year and a half ago. I've decided to stay in this game, and let's see how this thing rolls. So thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Lieutenant Hooke?
Thank you, Ramona and Shirley, for having me. I just want to leave with this. I'm incredibly proud of the SRO program, of the SROs that are in that program, the relationships with our schools and our community, the fact that we can have these type of conversations. And we're going to have to keep having these conversations. And that's a good thing, that we can come together like this and have these tough conversations. So MPO Gleason shared some stories tonight. MPO Gleason is exceptional, but most of the SROs are. And the stories that he has, while heartwarming, they're not unique to him. I could go on, and every SRO probably has a story very similar to Mark. So thank you for the time, and thank you for this platform.
Thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
Thank you. This is the beginning. I do want to make sure, especially that our students feel that their voices are heard. I think perhaps one of the most significant issues that we need to explore going forward is accountability. I understand the type of person that typically comes forward, but we always have to plan. We hope for the best and plan for the worst. And so I want our parents to know and our students to know that we're not oblivious to how they're feeling. We're not tone deaf, and we're here to listen. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you to all of our panelists. I think the conversation that you and Lieutenant Hooke began to have around accountability, if we could put some of those resources out in the email so that people who are interested will also be able to know what the chain of command is if there is a concern. I just want to remind everybody, September 22nd will be alternative accountability and restorative justice. So please be on the lookout from the email from the Communities of Trust. If you haven't joined the Communities of Trust, like Shirley said in the beginning, is communitiesoftrust.com. I think, is that right, Shirley? Is that the right address? Please check that out. Join their listserv so you can keep in touch with all that's happening through the Communities of Trust Committee. I thank you all. It is 8:30. Have a good night and be safe. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ramona.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.